Thank you for joining me once again. This is Greg. And in the last video, we spoke specifically about the difference between closing expenses and closing costs. And as you know, now there are 4 closing expenses. This video is going to talk about who pays those expenses. Well, first of all, that's a negotiated item. Somebody is going to pay those closing expenses. Whether it's you, whether it's the seller, whether it's a gift from a relative, but somebody's going to pay those closing expenses. So what I want to talk about is that if you're going to request the seller to pay them, which is very typical in most transactions today, you might ask the seller. They can refuse to pay them, then they become your obligation, or they can pay possibly all of them, depending on the type of loan you're getting, or you share the expense. But let's talk about that a little bit. So again, first of all, it's a negotiated item between you and the seller. Your agents are going to work on that. Now, how much can the seller pay? Well, if you're getting a conventional loan, and by the way, you're probably not going to remember all this, you don't have to. Your professional lender will know this. But if you're getting a conventional loan with that minimum 3% down that you can do on a first-time home buyer conventional loan, then the seller can only contribute 3% of the sales price, not your loan amount, sales price. Now, if you're putting down 10%, the seller can pay up to 6% of the sales price toward your closing expenses if the closing expenses are going to be that much. So that becomes something very important to know. If you're putting down less than 10% on a conventional loan, it's just 3% of the sales price. If it's 10% or more, then it can be up to 6% if the closing expenses run that high, and they might. Now, if you're getting an FHA loan, it doesn't make any difference how much the down payment is, little or less, little or more. The seller can pay up to 6% of the sales price. That's a pretty big number if you're only putting the minimum FHA down payment of 3.5%. So that can make a big difference. But the most important thing for you to know as a first-time home buyer to be is that there are closing expenses that we've talked about and that somebody's going to have to pay them. It's a negotiated item. And depending on how much you put down, the seller can pay as little as 3% to as much as maybe 6%. I hope that helps get you started. Remember, negotiated item, seller or you can pay it, somebody's got to, and could be as little as 3 or as much as 6% of the sales price. Let me know if you have questions. I'll be more than happy to assist you. Have a good day.